This episode contains discussions about abuse, trauma, and revenge. Listener discretion is advised. There are two kinds of people in this world. Those who take what they want, and those who refuse to let them. Some call it justice, others call it revenge. But what happens when the system meant to protect you turns against you? When the people in power exploit, control, and erase you? And what happens when the victims fight back, and fights back harder than they ever expected? Lisbeth Salander was never supposed to win. They called her unstable, a problem to be controlled, a girl too broken to have a voice. But they didn't realize one thing. Lisbeth was watching, learning, and when the time came, she didn't just expose them. She burned their whole world to the ground. This is Revenge and Madness, and today we unravel the story of Lisbeth Salander, the girl with the dragon tattoo, the girl who fought back. Lisbeth Salander's story is not just one of survival. It is a story of rebellion against a system designed to silence her. She was born into a world of violence, where the people meant to protect her either looked the other way or became her worst enemies. Her father, Alexander Zalichenko, was a brutal Soviet defector turned informant, protected by the very government that ignored his crimes. Her mother, trapped in an abusive relationship, was powerless to stop him. Lisbeth didn't wait for someone to save her. At 12 years old, she fought back the only way she knew how. She set her father on fire. Instead of being seen as a victim, she was institutionalized, declared legally incompetent, and placed under guardianship. From that moment, she learned a harsh lesson. Justice doesn't come from the system. It had to be taken. She was stripped of her rights, her independence controlled by a series of corrupt men who saw her as nothing more than a problem to be managed. But Lisbeth was more than they realized. She was watching, learning, and she was preparing to make them pay. Lisbeth Salander is not your typical Avenger. She isn't out to save the world or fix the broken system. Her actions are not about law or morality. They are about survival. She exists in the gray area between justice and revenge, punishing those who abuse their power, not because it's the right thing to do, but because they left her no other choice. Her greatest weapon isn't strength or brute force. It's intelligence. As a world-class hacker, Lisbeth has access to secrets that can destroy lives. And when she decides someone needs to be taken down, she does it with precision. Take, for example, Nils Bjurman, her corrupt legal guardian. He thought she was powerless. He used his authority to violate her, believing he would get away with it. But Lisbeth doesn't just fight back. She makes sure he will never hold power over another woman again. She tattoos the words, "I am a rapist pig," across his body, ensuring that every time he looks in the mirror, he is forced to face what he is. This isn't just revenge, it's a warning. A statement that the victim he tried to silence will never be ignored again. Lisbeth doesn't fight fair, she fights to win. Lisbeth's war doesn't stop at one corrupt man. She takes on institutions, entire systems built to protect the powerful while crushing the vulnerable. In The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, she partners with journalist Mikhail Blomqvist to uncover the dark secrets of the Avenger family. What starts as an investigation into a missing girl turns into the exposure of a serial killer, a man protected by his wealth and status. Lisbeth doesn't hesitate. She hacks. She manipulates. She digs until the truth can no longer be buried. But her fight becomes even more personal in The Girl Who Played with Fire and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest. She learns that the people who institutionalized her as a child were covering up for her father's crimes. When she is shot, buried alive, and left for dead, she refuses to be a victim. She claws her way back, not just to survive, but to destroy the men who thought they had won. And she doesn't just take revenge. She outsmarts them. In the final battle, it's not violence that wins. It's her mind. In a courtroom filled with people who once called her unstable, she exposes the entire conspiracy against her. She forces them to see her, not as the broken girl they tried to erase, but as the woman who took them down. Lisbeth Salander is unlike any other character in fiction. She is not a hero. She is not a villain. She is something else entirely. A survivor who refused to be controlled. Her trauma shaped her, but it never defined her. She doesn't just live with PTSD. She turned it into fuel. She is emotionally closed off, deeply distrustful, and often ruthless. But underneath her hardened exterior, there is loyalty. There is a sense of justice, her own version of it. She will go to war for the few she lets in, and she will burn entire institutions to the ground to protect them. But the question remains, can Lisbeth ever truly heal, or is she destined to be at war forever? Lisbeth Salander is more than just a character. She is a force, a reckoning, a living reminder that the people society tries to silence are often the ones with the most to say. In a world where power is currency, and the vulnerable are often ignored, disbelieved, or dismissed, Lisbeth fights back, not for justice, not for glory, but simply because she refuses to be anyone's victim. She doesn't seek to change the system, nor does she believe in noble crusades. She fights for herself, but in doing so, she becomes something more, a symbol of defiance, a question mark on the very concept of power and control, and perhaps, most importantly, a reminder that survival is its own kind of justice. But let's be real. Lisbeth Salander is not your traditional hero. She doesn't save the innocent or fight for the greater good. She's ruthless, calculated, and capable of extreme violence when pushed. So where does that leave us? What does that say about a world where survival demands such brutality? And what does it say about us that we find ourselves rooting for her? Is Lisbeth Salander a hero? Or is she simply a survivor, forged by the very cruelty she's had to endure? And at the end of the day, does it even matter? Thank you for joining us on Revenge and Madness, where survival isn't just a choice, it's a war. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, share, and tell me, who should we break down next? Who walks that razor-thin line between justice and madness? Until next time, remember this. When the world comes for you, when it tries to break you piece by piece, you have two choices. You can bend, or you can break it right back.